What's most important, Coach Jimmy Lynam, is that they found a way to escape with that. And earlier in the season, they lose a game against the Bulls. They lose a game against the Suns. They lose a game against the Kings. They figured out a way to get out of there with a win last night.
Yeah, I think that's well stated. The bottom line for me, this team is a better team right now than they were earlier in the season. And the fact that they found a way to win that game last night, I would say, would give evidence of that. And I thought Joel Embiid, as he usually does, he summed it up pretty succinctly after the game. He said, "We stole a win," no pun intended. And obviously his play on that out of bounds, when he used his athleticism and his length to steal that inbounds pass was the key play of the night.
Yeah, and you had Embiid and Simmons combined for 62 points and 20 rebounds. But I thought really an impressive play, Coach, was with about 10 seconds or so, the clock's counting down, that Simmons was smart enough to get the ball out of his hands and get it over to Redick, because it looked like the Bulls were trying to foul him late in that game. And then Redick, who had just missed a free throw, he gets fouled with 8 seconds left. But it shows that Simmons was smart enough to say, hey, I know that you're a better free throw shooter than me. And I thought that was a pretty big play in the game when the Bulls decided to foul late in the game instead of letting the Sixers maybe pull up a three.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, Mike. And I, to be honest, I have the game taped, obviously, and I didn't watch that the end of it yet. I knew that they fouled Redick intentionally, which for me that's 50-50. Not so much the intent of fouling, but the time left in the game. 8 seconds is an eternity in an NBA game. There's so many things that can happen, in the ensuing seconds. But I'm going to have to look at that, because that's an interesting observation that obviously a good tactic to foul a 55% foul shooter in Ben Simmons, but not only is Redick a good free throw shooter, he's the best in the NBA. So essentially, you're giving the other team 2 points at that stage, and you're banking on, number one, your ability. See, people say, there's an argument ongoing for years, and, should you foul when a three can tie the game? And if you foul them, you're only giving them 2 points. Yes, but now you have to be able to inbound the ball, number one. And the guy who receives the inbound pass obviously is going to get fouled. He better be able to make 2 free throws. Otherwise, it's a 2-point game and the other team's ball. So it's I'm going to have to look at the play to see if, in fact, they did intend to foul Simmons. It wouldn't surprise me. Simmons is a very, very bright player.
Since we're talking to Coach Lynam with us, Jim Lynam, we're talking Sixers and free throw shooting. That would have been the story last night, Coach, had they lost the game. But then Ben Simmons does step up and make 2 free throws at the biggest point and the 2 biggest free throws of the game. You remember that game earlier in the season, I'm sure, where the strategy was to hack a Ben, like where they were trying to put him on the line. Do you think his free throw shooting is improving, or is he improving just in his overall game?
Have to be honest and say I can't tell you that his free throw shooting has improved. He's mid-50s over the long haul. But I will say this: in late game situations, Simmons comes up big. If you look at just the demeanor with which he plays, he's a very poised, calm kind of person, and it carries over into his play on the game. He rarely is phased one way or another. He might make a bad turnover, or he might make a spectacular dunk. You pretty much see the same demeanor from him. And I think after the game, he said, he was very confident. He expected to make those 2 free throws. He only made like half of his free throws up to that point. I think he ended up 6 for 11, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, you're right.
So he was he was 4 for 9 at that point. But I'd take him at his word. He certainly looked very confident, poised to be, and he put them both dead center. So he just has as the stars do, they come up big. Embiid, again, that was one of his quotes after the game. Big-time players make big plays. Well, guess what? The 2 big-time Sixer players made big plays late game.
Yeah, and how about that stat last night that came out from the Sixers PR department? It's the first time 2 Sixers players have posted at least 30 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists since Charles Barkley and Johnny Dawkins. You got to like, Coach, when you get Sir Charles and Johnny Dawkins in a stat with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, right?
Yeah, how about it? They told me afterwards that was in a game I wouldn't have remembered. I mean, obviously, Barkley had those kind of games routinely. Johnny Although a really, really good NBA player, he wasn't a 30-point scorer. But they said that happened in a game we beat the Lakers back at the old Spectrum, I think back in 1990.
Coach, I know your hot take last night was about the bench, and of course the bench numbers were skewed last night because of what Portis did, but I thought that was a great question, and I'll ask it to you. How would you set the bench rotation if you were Brett Brown?
Well, I think what you see him doing, Mike, he's like looking ahead toward the playoffs, and when you get to the playoffs, you're going to like shrink. You're going to condense that bench. My guess is the Sixers will probably play 9 on a steady diet come playoff time. I think Marco, Bellinelli he's a proven, experienced player, terrific 3-point shooter, and a good all-round player, not just a guy that can make a shot. So I think he's going to be in that rotation for sure. And I think Timothé Luwawu probably gets squeezed out a little bit. And if you notice, Jared Bayless, he hasn't played the last few. So I think those two could be casualties come playoff time to getting significant minutes. I think Amir Johnson, you'll certainly still see. I know the Sixers like what he brings to the table, and some of the fans, don't maybe appreciate. Rashard Holmes, I think, is a very good young player, and it wouldn't bother me if he was in the rotation, but I don't think you're going to see that. So yeah, it's fewer people playing, and how you actually stack it up. I mean, the key guy for me off the bench is T.J. McConnell. He's kind of the leader of that group, and he brings the energy. And I think, as I say, you'll just see less people involved. And maybe Trevor Booker's still in the rotation, but not getting as many minutes.
Yeah, Coach Jimmy Lynam's with us from NBC Sports Philadelphia, Sixers pre- and post-game live analyst. And, Coach, the one thing with that is, and I agree, obviously, that teams start to shorten their bench as we get closer to the playoffs. The problem that the Sixers might have is, if you look at this schedule, it's like a sardine can packed in 26 games in the last month and a half. They're playing almost every other night and some back-to-backers here. And we know Joel, he played 35 minutes last night. They play again Saturday, Sunday. Can they afford to shorten their bench with him?
Well, yeah, I think they can. It means that maybe through these situations that you're talking about, like on the number one, it's going to be interesting to see how many back-to-backs Joel plays. There's one coming,
Saturday and Sunday, yep.
Yeah, and then I think there's a single midweek game, and I think there's another back-to-back towards the end of the week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep,
so it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, there you go. It'll be interesting to see how the Sixers kind of lay that out. But they'll be sensitive to that. And I think the fact of the matter is that Embiid is to a point where, there is no restriction. That if, in fact, we play back-to-back and we need them for 34, 35 minutes, then so be it.
Yeah. Did you ever have to,
and if you looked at...
Did you ever have to deal with that when you were coaching? Where they told you got to restrict minutes or you can't play guys. Like, I remember watching your teams play. It was like 5 guys and like Ron Anderson. That was it. Like, nobody else got any burn other than Ron Anderson. That was it.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean this in a wise guy fashion. It applies to me as much as to anybody else. We have like what I call a selective memory. One of those guys on those teams was Bobby Thornton. He played every night. And I know that because Bobby's a coach in the league, and I see him a lot. Scotty Brooks was my backup point guard. He played every night. So, we tend to remember, like, the guys who are the most prominent players. But I think your point is well taken. And they'll be cautious with Embiid and not overload him, with big-time minutes, particularly in back-to-back situations. But the point I was going to make is if you looked at the way Embiid played last night, literally 3 different times he dove on the floor for balls. This guy he's a tremendous competitor. He just has an incredible desire to win, to best his opponent. And if you watch the way he plays, he looks pretty healthy to me.
30 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 big blocks, and 3 steals for Joel Embiid. We're talking with Coach Jim Lynam, Sixers pre and post on NBC Sports Philadelphia. So maybe, Coach, because I went to Temple, I spent all those years here, and Coach Chaney preach about this, but one of the stats I always go to is turnovers. There was a point in the season where the Sixers' turnovers were their Achilles heel. Last night, they won the turnover battle, and I heard you say on the postgame show, quietly, they've improved that area of their game.
Yeah, I haven't done a detailed analysis, but with the computer, you can go to NBA stats and put certain filters in, and just real quickly there at one timeout, I was curious because I knew the Sixers were playing with low number of turnovers. Over the last 12 games, they've averaged less than 15 turnovers in a game. And that would put them middle of the pack in the NBA. Much, much better, than their season number. They're up above 17 turnovers a game, and that's a big-time problem. I mean, you're going to literally steal games from yourself if you turn it over at that, kind of a rate up toward 20 per night. And I think they've worked real hard at trying to improve that. And I think come playoff time, you'll see the benefit of their effort.
Jim Lynam's with us here. Of course, the Sixers tomorrow night right here at 5 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN. They take on the Orlando Magic, and then Sunday night in Washington. I know you've said all year you think the ceiling for this team is about that 4 seed. They are creeping into that 4, even the 3 area with the Cavs losing last night. So this should be an interesting stretch on. That Washington game will be very interesting on Sunday because they're right there. But how important do you think a home first-round series would be for this team?
Well, home court is a big deal to me. They're 7-game sets, and given the fact that maybe the way they're playing right now, if they can, it's a huge win last night because they had to get that road streak and halted. They lost 4 in a row on the road. I think now they're 13, 2 games under 500 on the road, 13 and 15, if I'm not mistaken. And teams normally who are going to be playing well at the end of the season with a legitimate chance of advancing into playoffs, they're going to have more road wins than home wins. That's just the profile of the team. And I think if the Sixers finish strongly, which I expect them to do, I think you'll see they will have more wins on the road than they have losses. So I think they're going to be in good shape. I will tell you this. I think I can say this with certainty. There is not a team in the East, and you can include whoever you want in that. Right now, Toronto has the best record. Cleveland obviously has LeBron James. Boston is the best defensive team by the numbers. Not one of them will want to play the Sixers in the 7-game set come May or June.
And I probably would echo that as well. Coach Jim Lynam, the Philadelphia 76ers tomorrow night, 5 o'clock versus Orlando. Listen to the game right here on 97.3. Thanks, Coach.
My pleasure, guys. Good talking.